Welcome to the Intel Hub News Brief, uncovering the cold hard truth that the corporate media just can't handle. A service of the IntelHub.com. Now, here's Joe Joseph from Freedom Link Radio and Popeye from Federal Jack.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Intel Hub News Brief with myself, Popeye, and my good friend, Joe Joseph. Today, we are going to be discussing Ron Paul again and the 2012 election. Specifically, we want to touch on a few things. Joe got an interesting email, which he decided to do a little research, and he wants to dissect the email for you. And I'm going to give the floor to him in a second. And then we're also going to discuss just some of the latest media attacks, which are just completely pathetic, including the Jon Huntsman, the supposed Jon Huntsman video that was created by the Jon Huntsman campaign, or supposedly, allegedly, whatever word you want to use, was created by the Jon Huntsman campaign to discredit Ron Paul. And if you're not sure about that, we will get into that. So, Joe, without further ado, the floor is yours. Read the audience the letter you got.
Well, yeah, so, Freedom Link Radio gets a bunch of email that comes in, and one of them kind of struck me as like, oh, God, something that we have to address. And, folks, you really, really, really have to get out, because this is the biggest sticking point with Ron Paul that I've come to find out. And there's a lot of negative media out on this particular topic. But the email goes, so far, this is what keeps my friends from touching Ronnie with a 10-foot pole. They feel his stance is naive at best, dangerous at worst. And what he's referencing is a couple of WorldNet Daily articles. The first is labeled, Meet Ron Paul's Jeremiah Wright. Find out where he gets his guidance on Israel, Islam, and foreign policy. So right off the bat, WorldNet Daily is saying that Ron Paul gets his foreign policy stance from Jeremiah Wright. Are you kidding me? I mean, you got to see this for what it is and understand this. WorldNet Daily is nothing more than a neocon talking point site. That's what it is. Now, here's the thing with deception, folks. Deception is not deception if it's not believable. So you have to weave some truth in there in order to make it deception. So meet Ron Paul's Jeremiah Wright. The second one just so happens to be Ron Paul's Saul Alinsky. So they're referencing a communist and whatever you want to call Jeremiah Wright. I mean, I'm not too happy about that. But basically what they're saying is because Ron Paul says that Israel can defend itself against a nuclear Iran or an Iran in general. And don't think for a second that Ron Paul doesn't believe that Iran is a dangerous threat, because he does. But he also believes that deterrence is what protects us, not going over and invading sovereign nations or anything else, but deterrence. That means building up your forces here, making it less advantageous for them to attack, and then set a standard. And then you say, if you attack this country or anybody, it can be proven that somebody from your country attacked this country, then we will have a formal declaration of war, as the Constitution states, and we will lay waste to your entire country. We will not, our bombs will not discriminate against your women, against your children, against your churches or your schools. We will level them all. That's what war is all about. That's what you don't realize about Ron Paul. Ron Paul's very serious about protecting this country, but what he's saying is that you have to do it by the way the Constitution says to do it, not by waging illegal wars that you go and fight for years and years and years and years with no resolution whatsoever. And that's all these articles are highlighting, folks. And we'll make references for you in the article, and you can read it at your leisure. But that's all it is. It's neocon talking points. And if you don't believe that Ron Paul's right about Israel, Popeye, could you play this clip? This is Benjamin Netanyahu himself addressing Congress. Go ahead.
My friends, you don't need to do nation building in Israel. We're already built. You don't need to export democracy to Israel. We've already got it. And you don't need to send American troops to Israel. We defend ourselves.
Well, that sounds pretty convincing. And it's, again, straight from the horse's mouth. So what do you believe? Do you believe talking heads in the mainstream media or neocon talking points on WorldNet Daily? Or do you believe Benjamin Netanyahu, who addresses Congress and tells them directly that they don't need our help, that Israel can defend themselves, that they don't need democracy from the United States? Why? They already have democracy. So who are you going to believe? And then let me preface it with this. Life experience. Life experience is key to understanding and seeing the truth for what it is. Now, Popeye and I are both veterans who spent time overseas, and I can tell you this right now. What they tell you and what you see in the news is not what really goes on over there. I spent 6 years of my life over there, and I can tell you this, that 99% of the people over there just want to be left alone. That's all they want to do. They're not militant. They're not radical Islamic fundamentalists like the mainstream media would have you think that, oh yes, the ragheads are going to come and get us. It's a very small minority that has a lot of power over the masses in these Arab nations. And I can tell you that there is a very similar instance occurring in the United States and in the Western world. And if you don't think that that elitist cabal that runs things at the top, these banksters that and special interests that pull the strings of our non-representing representatives, if you don't think that they're the same and just as complicit as radical Muslim fundamentalists, you're sadly mistaken. Because it's the exact same thing. It's just a different wrapper. That's all it is. Just a different wrapper. Popeye, your thoughts?
I agree. And you have our country being controlled by AIPAC and these other special interest groups that are controlled by certain factions over in Israel. I'm not saying that Israel is, in complete control of every little thing, but when it comes to foreign policy and bombing other countries, Iraq, the only people that the invasion of Iraq served and that really benefited from was Israel, and not really the people, but the government.
Well, there was that, and the fact that Saddam Hussein was the first person to take his country off the dollar standard for oil. And it set a horrible precedent for the United States, which is why, one of the major reasons why Bush had to go in and clean his clock. God forbid they don't use dollars, that they use euros, because then all of a sudden all these other countries say, oh, well, if he can do it, then
he was on our payroll, Joe.
I know, for a long time.
And I know you were actually part of the initial invasion back in the 90s. And
actually, I wasn't in the like the Gulf War. I actually got to mop up the mess when it was all over.
Which is even worse. So
yeah, which is even worse. But more so is you get to talk to people, believe it or not, and you find out, hey, you're human? What? Huh? Unbelievable. You want to be left alone too? You don't like what's going on? Oh, amazing. Why am I here? Oh, well, raises all sorts of questions. And it's not just Iraq. It's not just Afghanistan, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere. People, you have to put yourself in the shoes of these other people. When we go in and we invade these countries, we're not doing them a service. Believe me, we're not doing them a service. It's really a sad state of affairs, and you would not know this unless you go there. It just invalidates everything that you know or heard from talking heads on the mainstream media. Heck, your history books. Go over there. If you're truly concerned about what's going on, go for yourself and see for yourself. And maybe then your eyes will awaken and say, wow, you know what? Ron Paul he really does make sense. Huh. Yeah. Saul Alinsky. Look at what they are comparing him to.